Well, I think on a really basic level it's because I wasn't particularly good at numbers. For me, words were always far more interesting and concepts were what was far more interesting. To a certain degree as well, I always wanted to have some sort of work with the community, kind of help out as much as I could and do something that was going to be of benefit. And law was really a great vehicle for that.
Well, my first degree was in psychology, and partway through that degree I realised that it wasn't what I wanted to do, but I still continued to carry on with it anyway because I thought one degree is better than none. At the end of that course I went off travelling, and when I went back to the UK I started work in an in-house legal department through a temping agency, and just absolutely loved the work. Got to work with some really good solicitors, and got to do some court work and that kind of thing. So that's what motivated me to want to become a solicitor.
Well, I chose to study law because I enjoy trying to get to the bottom of a problem. And that's, I suppose, what the law is all about. And it's also really satisfying and a real privilege to be able to help people come to a sensible solution to their problems. And that's one of the things that the law allows you to do.
I actually started university studying a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science double degree. In my first year arts units I was studying political science, and that sparked my interest in the connection between international law, politics and economics, and I guess the possibilities of a holistic approach to conflict resolution across those areas. So I enrolled in a Bachelor of Laws the following year to explore that a bit further.
Well, I'm currently practicing in criminal law. I've been practicing as a prosecutor, first as a federal prosecutor and now as a state prosecutor for about 5.5, nearly 6 years. When I first started practice I worked in private practice and I did family law. That didn't last particularly long. 18 months of that was enough of that for me. But right now I found the area of law that I really love, and this is the area of law I think that I'm going to stay in for some time. I'm
currently at a community legal centre, and we specialise in the area of the National Credit Code and also consumer law, so the ACL.
So I've just come to the bar in Western Australia, and I practice as a barrister at Francis Burt Chambers. I've most recently been at King and Wood Mallisons, and my practice areas there were mainly energy and resources disputes, so joint venture disputes, royalty disputes, those sorts of things. But my background's really in property, so property-based litigation is really what I do, and I'm also doing a bit of criminal law as well, which gets me down to court.
I currently practice in the East Kimberley region of Western Australia for legal aid. So we work a lot in remote towns and communities. We are pretty much a generalist legal practice, so I practice in criminal defence, in childcare and protection matters, family law, family violence law, and other civil matters, things like criminal injuries compensation, a little bit of consumer protection, and a lot of issues around people's driver's licences.
What I enjoy most about the work that I'm doing right now is that every brief, every file is different. We're talking about people's lives, their stories, and everything has its own nuances. So really it's an area of law that pulses with life. In my view, that's quite different to drafting or contract or commercial or civil litigation to some extent. There's always an interesting story in criminal law, I think.
Well, because it's a community legal centre, I get to provide free legal advice to people that wouldn't normally be able to afford a private solicitor. And I still get to do my commercial law work, which was the area that I was working in before I studied law.
Look, I really enjoy the advocacy side of law, and certainly with property-based litigation, it's good because it's been my background, and I know a lot about it, and I know the lingo. So when you're down in court and you're reacting to things that the judge is saying or a witness is saying, really helps to be across the topic. But the advocacy side of practice is really what I'm interested in, what I enjoy.
I enjoy practising from a regional office because I'm required to practice in many areas of law. It also really requires me to find, I guess, creative and resourceful ways to work with clients and to work with other people in the justice system. I really enjoy travelling to remote parts of the state for work, so I'm not just stuck in an office or in the central business district, back and forth between a court building and the office. I also really enjoy building relationships within the communities that we work in. I find that it really enhances my understanding of legal and access to justice issues for people who are in remote regions, and that's a lot of people when you're talking about Western Australia.
Well, when I started studying, I didn't start with law. I started more down the pre-med path. After about a year of that, I realised that I was missing the subjects that I really enjoyed in high school, and that was politics and legal studies and government and those sorts of things. So I decided to take a chance and get into law. And the first few years of practice, or the first few years of studying law, I certainly didn't intend on practicing. It was something that happened maybe in my penultimate year, certainly consolidated in my final year, and that's really when I wanted to go out and be a lawyer. My suggestion to people is that if they want to do that, try and have a serious think about that earlier on. The earlier on you decide in your studies that you want to practice law, the better it is, because obviously you can garner as much experience and practice in the field as much as possible.
Well, because my first job and experience in law was in a in-house legal department, it was a commercial litigation area that I was working in, so I always planned on wanting to go into that as soon as I finished law, so that was always what was at the forefront of my mind when I was studying. But then the longer I was at uni, the more I sort of got into the social justice side of things, and that really appealed to me. So so I think my original path started off as commercial litigation, but then sort of got more peppered with the access to justice side of things.
Well, when I first started studying law, or as I was going through, I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer, and that I was going to go and work for the tax office for a little while and get the expertise up, and then be a tax practitioner and only doing tax law. Because I studied income tax law and business enterprises taxation, that sort of thing at uni, and thought that would be a really good way of practicing law. But I decided against doing that predominantly, so I still do a little bit of tax, but I've got a much broader practice than just tax.
When I was studying, I guess I probably saw myself, in terms of the law, involved in international community development, some of those probably more idealistic areas of development or policy work. Certainly I saw myself doing that more than being involved in transactional legal practice here in Australia. I certainly didn't think I'd be a courtroom lawyer, but I appear in court most days of the week. And I guess for me the idea of being a human rights advocate of some sort always appealed to me when I was studying. And actually, as it turns out, my job as a lawyer for legal aid in rural and remote Western Australia combines community development and human rights advocacy, and I understand now a lot more than I did as a student that the work of lawyers here in regional and remote Australia is a really important part of the development of human rights advocacy and anti-discrimination work in our country.
There's a number of challenges. In my particular field, one of the biggest challenges is hearing those words at the end of a criminal trial from the jury not guilty. It's difficult to divorce yourself, I think, from the outcome, but what we need to remember is that it's not an outcomes-based system, it's actually process-driven. And from our point of view, as a prosecutor and someone that represents the state of Western Australia, our job and our role is to present the evidence fairly and firmly, to advocate a particular position, to act as a voice for victims and to allow witnesses to tell their story in court, and then to hand over the ultimate decision to the jury, being the members of the community. Sometimes you get a guilty verdict, sometimes you get a not guilty verdict. What you're supposed to do is try and divorce yourself from that outcome, but obviously it's difficult to hear, and it's certainly difficult to tell a victim of crime and a complainant in the criminal matter what the outcome was. But I think a lot of people that are part of that process really value the ability to be able to tell their story, and that's certainly something that we try and do, give a voice to people that have been victims of crime.
Well, before I started work here, I'm quite new to the community legal sector. I was working for 4 years at a commercial law firm in the area of commercial litigation. So I got a lot of knowledge and skills and experience in that area. Now I'm working for a community legal centre. We've got very specific funding, so that means that we can only advise on particular areas of the law. So even if I know the answer, I have to turn clients away and say that we can't advise you because we're not funded to do so, so I have to refer them on. So I find that a bit challenging sometimes.
It's an interesting question really around challenging parts of the role, because it's always hard to have a good balance, and the law is a hard job, and you do need to concentrate very intently sometimes and work longer hours. But the key, I think, is to finding that right balance, so that you're fresh when you need to be fresh, and that you're able to have that downtime when you need to have the downtime. And the key is being able to switch off and just relax when it's time to relax. So really, I think achieving the right balance is probably the hardest thing facing practitioners at the moment.
I guess assisting people who are struggling with intense disadvantage in their lives is a big challenge sometimes. It means the legal problem solving also requires me to assist clients with their own emotional and mental health management throughout the process of resolving the legal issues. Some of the practical challenges up here are things like the weather. We have had some recent flooding in Kununurra, and that has meant that our court schedule and ability to find clients or get to clients has been affected. We also have very transient populations in this area, so those are some of the practical challenges that we face day to day. But I guess those are the things that also make the job very rewarding. So being a part of the process for communities to increase their own capacity for some of that legal problem solving is made a lot more rewarding because of the challenges that we have to overcome.
Law is a profession, it's not a business. That's something that the Chief Justice says to newly admitted practitioners during the ceremony. Being a member of the Law Society, in my view, is the best way to get involved with the profession. It opens doors via the events that the Law Society runs, and it allows members to meet other practitioners from all sorts of practices, both junior and senior, and it helps you really get involved in the small group, and that can only be a good thing, I think.
Well, I studied here as an international student, so I arrived in 2007 not knowing anyone in Perth, let alone anyone in the legal community. So I joined the Law Society when I was still a student, just so that I could get up to speed with what was happening in the legal profession, and also keep an eye on what was happening in the legal profession. I found it quite beneficial to be a member of the society in 2010, which was when lawyers actually got taken off of the skilled migration occupation list. So that was when I just finished my College of Law, and basically what that meant for me was that I wouldn't be able to apply here as a skilled migrant because lawyers were no longer on the list. So I found having the Law Society to turn to for advice on support really useful.
Well, the legal profession can be a very collegiate profession, and that is best demonstrated by the Law Society in my view. I've actually met a lot of my very close friends through the Law Society. I sit on a number of committees and I'm on the council, and it really helps you keep your finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on, and if there's an opportunity for you to give an opinion or to steer policy or to have a say on issues that are facing the profession at the moment, the society really gives you the best opportunity to do that.
There are a number of ways membership with the Law Society benefits me. I think it allows me to contribute to the legal professional community by serving on committees like the Young Lawyers Committee and the Country Practitioners Committee. It helps me stay connected with other members of the legal profession, which is very important when you're working in a more isolated place like Kununurra, where I am. It also provides me access to ongoing education and skill building, and the opportunity to connect with mentors, which is another very important part of your professional development when you're a young lawyer.
The work that I do involves me travelling a lot to the Kimberley, and I'm part of a small team that does circuit work up in Kununurra and Derby and Broome. I spend usually 1 or 2 weeks out of every month up there. Prosecuting serious criminal matters in that remote and regional area is like nothing else, and it's very different to running a criminal trial in the Perth Metro setting. You go out bush and you knock on doors and you visit communities in the middle of nowhere, and you're trying to find witnesses, and you're trying to find a victim of a crime that maybe doesn't want to come to court or has such an alien experience of coming to court. The challenges are immense up there, and it's not uncommon for you to be chatting to a witness the morning of trial under the boa tree, to help them tell their story and to prepare them for what the process of giving evidence and being cross-examined on their story is all going to be about. When it all comes together, it's a brilliant thing to watch, and you might not get the result that you want at the end of the day, but we're there to help victims and witnesses tell their story to a jury, and if that occurs, then really half the battle is won.
So I enjoy being able to provide good quality legal advice to clients who wouldn't normally be able to afford a private solicitor or legal representation, and it's also good to know that when you are spending a lot of time on a file, getting up to speed on the facts, researching areas of the law, having meetings with clients and phone conferences and meetings with other solicitors, that it's not going to get billed to the client at the end of the day.
I think there's no greater feeling than walking out of court out after a win, and that's not a personal thing or an ego thing. That's you see the look on the client's face when you win, and they will generally come down and get the judgment with you, or be there for the result. And seeing the satisfaction on a client's face when you win or when you've got a good result for them, that's certainly very rewarding. But the other thing that I really found rewarding as well is mentoring younger lawyers and seeing their progression, and seeing how far they come from when you first start working with them to how they develop over the years, and that's also pretty close behind the client satisfaction, I think.
Again, the best advice that I received was that if you wanted to be a lawyer, that you'll get there eventually, and that for some people it may take longer than others. I think that's particularly true in the current state of play now. There's a lot of law schools out there, a lot of law schools in WA, there's a lot of law grads. It is not an ever expanding profession in this state, and so there's a limited amount of jobs. I think, though, that advice still holds true, that if you do want to end up practicing law, you'll get there. It might not be on Articles Day that you get an offer, but certainly if you have that ambition, you'll get there eventually. I was not one of those people that got an offer on Office Day, and it was heartbreaking. And there were a few firms that I had really set my sights on. But at the end of the day, so much about it is getting your name out there, and speaking to senior practitioners, and talking to the people that can be an advocate for you within the profession. I got articles at a great firm simply because I had done some work experience with a barrister, and that particular barrister had bumped into a family law partner at an event and said, "I know a guy, he really enjoys family law, you should have a chat with him." And then once you get in, doors are open for you.
Well, prior to studying law, I worked with a group of solicitors, and when I told them that I wanted to study law, one of the things one of the solicitors advised me was to try and get as much work experience as possible in one of or several of the big law firms whilst I was studying. So I did find that quite beneficial, because not only does it give you really good experience, but it also looks great on your CV when you're trying to apply for jobs at the end of your degree.
Well, the best advice I received was don't try and rote learn everything. What you really want to do is just strive to understand every concept that you come across, and also don't just read the head notes. Make sure you read the whole decision so you properly understand it.
I guess if you're uncertain whether you've chosen the right degree to study, ask yourself, can I see myself enjoying this work for the next 10 years? And if the answer is no, then maybe think about making some changes. But if the answer is I don't know, then just go with your instincts, and you can always make changes later. In the meantime, remember that every day you're learning something, and that's always time well spent.
In this current market, if you want to practice law, you need to get as much experience as possible, and you, with respect, can't be picky. Brilliant if it's paid work, but if it's unpaid, so be it. You really need to get your name out there. You need to meet people in the profession, junior, senior, everyone in between. You need to bulk up that resume. I say this from the point of view from someone that came to that way too late. And by the time that I was applying for clerkships and grad positions, people had built up pages of experience, legal experience in their CV. So I was certainly on the back foot. Do your research as well, and really have a think about the types of areas that excite you and that interest you. You have to convince, I think, prospective employers that you want to be here. If you're applying for the DPP, know that the D in the DPP stands for director, not the department. You probably only make mistakes like that once, but they can be quite fatal, I think.
Well, we've all been in the same boat, we've all been there, so I would say use your networks and your peers as much as you can. If you've got a mentoring program through your uni, use that. I know I did when I was at Notre Dame. As a first year student, I got buddied up with a student in their penultimate year, and it was just great to have someone who's been there, done that, and gone through the same things as you, that you can just sound off all your issues to, and that's what I would recommend.
I think get down to business straight away at uni, and make sure that the core units like contract, property, trusts and equity, which you tend to study relatively early on in your law degree, make sure you get a good grounding in those and that you get a proper understanding of those units, because they will probably form the basis of the core understanding that you need when you actually get into practice.
My advice to current students is be courageous in your studies and in your career. Look for opportunities that will offer you new experiences and challenges, because those are the things that will also bring you the best rewards.